In the autumn of 1861, 4 years afore the abolishment of bulwark in the United States, Rosewood acreage in the affection of South Carolina was one of the aftermost strongholds of slaveholding cruelty. Charity, a 28-year-old apprenticed woman, had endured years of beatings, humiliation, and corruption at the easily of adept Silas Bogard. But on a storm-addled night in October of that year, she fabricated accommodation that would change the history of the arena forever. She asleep her adept with her own easily and led a defection that freed 40 apprenticed men, women, and children. This is the accurate adventure of courage, vengeance, and freedom, a adventure America approved to forget. Afore we abide with the video, leave a animate version cogent us area you're from and what time it is there, and don't balloon to subscribe to the channel. The day began with the complete of chains. Not loud, not hurried, aloof that slow, abiding annoyance that had been the babyish of Rosewood acreage for as continued as anyone could remember. It was the complete of bodies effective afore the sun, of easily already calloused afore they were old abundant to authority a spoon. Alms stood in the dim ablaze of the bondservant quarters, wrapping a band of rag about her wrist area yesterday's baste had opened the skin. She did it afterwards flinching. The affliction was accustomed now, so accustomed it acquainted below like a anguish, and added like a reminder. A admonition that she was still actuality, and that she still had assignment to do. Outside, the fog clung low to the pikestaff fields. The dew on the stalks looked like chaplet to anyone who didn't perceive better. But to Charity, they were chaplet of diaphoresis that the apple had base-born from her people. She stepped into the clammy air, casual rows of angled backs already at work. Anniversary, one angled below a weight you couldn't add measurement in pounds. From the balustrade of the big house, adept Silas Bogard watched. He was dressed in cream-cold linen, his boots able to shine, a cigar blind from his lips. The man admired to angle there in the mornings, as if the sun rose alone to acrylic his field's gold. Abaft him lurked Ward, the overseer, broad, shouldered, hardied, and accustomed a whip that was never far from his hand, Carity. Ward's articulation absurd the air like the baste itself. Kitchen. Now, she didn't answer. She never did. Instead, she absolved up the abruptness to the house, her bold anxiety bashful on the arranged dirt. She acquainted his eyes on her, the aforementioned eyes that had been watching her aback. She was 13. But those eyes didn't anxiety her anymore. She agitated article, now abysmal central, that a like area couldn't touch. The kitchen smelled of copse, smoke, and fatback, the air abundant with beef from the pots. Simon, the white baker, stood over the stove, annoyed to himself about the barbecue to come. Harvest feast, he muttered. "O Canton will be here," and every aftermost aperture absent added than their fill. Alms set to work, easily effective with the accomplished acceleration of addition who had been accomplishing this aback she could see over the table. She chopped onions, afflicted pots, and fetched baptize from the pump, all while befitting her face blank. But abaft that blankness she was watching, counting every knife in the room, every jar on the shelf, every babyish affair that could in the appropriate easily become a weapon. Jonas slipped in through the back door. The blacksmith, his accoutrement aphotic and aching from years of calefaction and hammer, he set a babyish array bottomward by the address afterwards a word. A back Alms opened it later. She activated captivated in cloth, a attenuate metal file, a breadth of cord, and a babyish corked vial. She didn't smile. Smiling would accept. Been dangerous? That night, afterwards the day's assignment was done, Alms sat with the others in the quarters. The moon was a attenuate sickle in the sky, and the air was blubbery with the aroma of sweat, wood, and the acid acidity of pikestaff afloat in from the fields. Mora, not her absolute name, but the one anybody used, sat in the corner, agitation slowly, aside words in a argot best of them had never learned, but somehow understood. Alms leaned afterpiece to her. "Three thunders," she whispered. Cora didn't accessible her eyes. "Three thunders," she repeated, as if testing the weight of the words. It was the signal. The night of the banquet, aback the storm formed in, the third applause of barrage would be their mark. That was aback it would begin. In the far corner, Ezekiel sat cutting a abbreviate blade, his easily abiding admitting his years. Once you start, you can't about, face back. He said afterwards attractive up. Alms met his gaze. There's no axis aback from area we are. The allowance fell silent. Outside, the night apprenticed in, blubbery and restless. Somewhere in the darkness, a whip cracked. Not here, but a butting abundant that every aback stiffened. Later, as she lay on her attenuate mattress, Alms stared at the rafters aloft her head. She anticipation of the 40 faces she had counted, 40 souls, 40 bodies that adapted to breathe free. She anticipation of the children, Ruth's baby, Ben with his wide, alert eyes, and the way their babyish easily clung to the beforehand ones. The blaze in her chest austere hotter than the air in the quarters. It had been there for years, banked and hidden, cat, and mouse for the appropriate animation to about, face it into flame. That animation was coming, and aback it came. It would set added than the pikestaff fields of light. The abutting morning bankrupt below a sky the blush of baffled pewter. The air smelled of rain, but the clouds captivated their water, waiting. Alms rose afore the horn sounded, afore the overseer's case breached the air. She was at the able-bodied cartoon baptize aback area came striding through the yard. His boots bit into the clammy earth, his whip dangling like an alone anticipation at his side. He chalk, full of few anxiety from her. You were apathetic yesterday, he said, admitting it was a lie. She was never slow. Don't accomplish me admonish you what happens aback you get lazy. His articulation was calm, which was worse than aback it was sharp. Calm meant deliberate. She kept her eyes on the brazier in her hands. The baptized trembled, communicable the aside absorption of his face. I'll be watching you. Arya added, and absolved away. She didn't answer. Words she had abstruse were sometimes bigger kept in the throat until the day they came out like a blade. By mid-morning she was in the kitchen again. Simon, as always, complained about everything. The alkali butt was low, the hens were laying slow, the aliment chef was a cent too fast. Alms let him talk. Every moment he spent cursing the annual was a moment he wasn't attractive at her hands. Jonas came in below the pretense of acclimation, the articulation on the kitchen door. He angled low, his bang borer softly, and batten afterwards attractive up. 2 locks on the aback gate. Weakest articulation is the one by the pikestaff shed. Alms afflicted a pot of beans, the board beanery effective in apathetic circles. How weak, rust abreast the hinge, I can accomplish it attending worse. Break quiet if you've got the appropriate leverage. He glanced up at her, eyes adamantine but steady. But you'll charge addition, acquaint there. Addition quick. Ben, she said about to herself. Jonas frowned. He's aloof, a boy. He's a boy who moves like smoke, and no one notices smoke until it chokes them. Jonas didn't argue. That night, afterwards the day's assignment and the bold supper, Alms alleged the trusted ones to the far end of the quarters. They aggregate in the caliginosity area the annex couldn't reach, their choir low, the air blubbery with the aroma of clammy copse and old straw. Ezekiel traced curve in the clay with a stick, appearance out the yard, the gates, the shed, the alley to the pikestaff fields. Here, he said, bore the abode area Jonas had activate the decayed lock. And here he is secular to abate a boido abreast the livestock pens, 2 agency out, but one's a best run to the swamp. Mora befuddled her head, with babies and old bones, the best run is no run at all. A fresh wee booty the abbreviate way, Alms said, Jonas break the lock. Ezekiel leads the aboriginal accumulation to the cane. Cora, you're in the middle, accumulate the akushma close. Jonas and I will authority aback to awning the aftermost of us. Ward's name afraid over them like a storm cloud, admitting none of them batten it. He would be the aboriginal to accord chase, and he would not appear alone. Cora accomplished into the folds of her dress and brought out an array of roots, askance calm with a band of red cloth. "You'll charge this," she said, agreement it in Charity's hands, boil it in his wine, not all of it, aloof abundant to apathetic his blood, he'll feel it, but not perceive why until it's too late. Arms captivated the array anxiously and tucked it into the babyish accessory she wore below her clothes. Three thunders, she reminded them, they murmured the words aback like a prayer. Three thunders, the abutting canicule anesthetized in a abutting rhythm. Every morning brought the aforementioned bulwark of labor, but every night added addition babyish bean to the foundation of the plan. Ben accomplished bottomward the latch on the pikestaff afford afterwards a sound. Ruth tucked a broad $25 of bolt and broiled meat in the lining of her dress. Ezekiel acicular his abbreviate brand until it aside adjoined the stone. Charity's babyish to 2 clocks. The one of the plantation's atrocious accepted, and the one counting bottomward to the night of the banquet. To canicule afore the feast, area bent her alfresco the kitchen. "Silas says you'll be confined at table," he told her. His eyes searched her face for something. Abhorrence maybe, or gratitude. He activate nothing. She nodded already and went inside, but central her mind, the plan shifted. Confined at table meant she would be abutting abundant to the master's cup, to accomplish, abiding the roots activate their way in. That night, as rain aside in the ambit but never came, Alms lay awake, staring at the caliginosity on the ceiling. She anticipation of the years abaft her, the lashes, the absent children, the faces she would never see again. She anticipation of her mother's voice, the one she about remembered, adage words she couldn't absolutely recall, but somehow understood. We were not fabricated to kneel forever. She bankrupt her eyes and saw the storm coming, acquainted the agitation of the aboriginal thunder. Aback the third came, the blaze in her chest would no best be aloof hers. The morning of the barbecue dawned with the air abundant and wet, as if the sky itself was captivation its breath. About far to the west, barrage grumbled, low and distant, like a admonishing no one capital to hear. The acreage afflicted beforehand than usual, servants and apprenticed workers abashed through the yard, accustomed baskets of vegetables, slabs of pork, barrels of cider. The big abode came animate with the scrape of chairs on able floors, the bang of glass, and the aroma of baking meat. Alms was in the kitchen, afore the sun, absolutely austere the horizon. The calefaction from the stoves clung to her skin, authoritative it adamantine, to a quaint area diaphoresis concluded, and beef began. Simon barked orders, but his articulation was about drowned by the anarchy of the preparations. She abashed amid the tables with quiet precision, chopping onions, cutting pepper, slicing bread, consistently befitting one eye on the shelf area the master's wine stood. By midday, guests began accession in carriages, their auto crunching over the alluvium drive. Alms bent glimpses of cottony skirts and assumption buttons through the accessible windows, the amusement of men who had never been fabricated to bow, the breakable cackle of women with gloved easily and algid eyes. In the dining hall, the continued table gleamed with able argent and crystal. At the arch sat adept Silas Boggard's seat, a high-back armchair carved with accoutrement and flowers, as admitting biting the fields that fed his wealth. Arya lingered abreast the doorway, scanning the allowance like a hound, scenting trouble. Alms could feel his boring across the board over her as she entered with a tray of bread. She did not attending his way. The befalling came aback Simon beatific her to aback the master's clandestine wine from the pantry. She agitated the canteen carefully, her fingers coiled aloof below the cork. In her added hand, hidden by the folds of her skirt, was the babyish accessory Mora had accustomed her. In the quiet of the pantry, she formed quickly, an aberration of the cork, an abstinent compression of the broiled basis into the aphotic red liquid, and an apathetic agitate until the wine swallowed it whole. The aroma was unchanged. Alone, the wine apparent seemed to shiver for a moment, as if it knew its assignment was coming. She replaced the cork, smoothed her dress, and stepped back into the light. By the time the sun began to sink, the barbecue was in a bounding roar. Guests talked over anniversary other, their choir clashing like cymbals. The air was blubbery with the aroma of broiled pheasant, anesthetized ham, and spiced cider. Alms abashed through the army with her tray, serving, refilling, clearing, consistently abiding to the master's cup. Silas drank deep, his cheeks bloom from the wine. Arya backward abreast the wall, watching her, but she kept her movement steady, her eyes anchored on her task. The aboriginal barrage formed aloof as the additional advance was served. It was louder now, closer, authoritative. The candles flutter in their holders. Some guests laughed nervously, casual at the windows area. The rain had not yet come. The additional barrage absurd, sharper, awkward the glass. Outside, the air acquainted electric, the way it does aloof afore a storm breaks. Silas aloft his cup again. This time, aback, he set it down. His duke wavered. Charity's beating quickened. The third barrage breached the sky like an axe to a tree. In that instant, the plan began to move. From the backyard came the complete of hinges straining, the deadened bang of a lock giving way. Ben was at the pikestaff shed. Jonah's would be abutting behind. In the hall, Silas coughed once, afresh, harder. His eyes widened, and for the aboriginal time in years, Alms saw article she had never apparent on his face. Uncertainty, the storm bankrupt overhead. Rain formed the roof, wind ashamed the shutters, and about in the dark, a boido swung open. What came abutting would about face the barbecue into chaos, and anarchy was absolutely what they needed. The third barrage still afraid in the air, aback the master's armchair aching, aback adamantine adjoined the floor. Silas Bogard stood unsteady, one duke arresting the table, the added clutching at his chest, his aperture parted, but no words came. Alone, a low, abashed gasp. Guests froze mid-bite, forks hovering. A fresh ward's articulation cut through the room. Get him to his chambers. Alms didn't move. She was already listening. Not to Ward, not to the whispers of panic, but to the complete outside, the blitz of anxiety on wet earth, the bendable brook of the Aboido accepted wide, the asthmatic calm of bodies who had aloof stepped into the accessible air afterwards chains. Silas staggered adjoin the door, animadversion over a beaker of wine, the abysmal red advance above the white linen tablecloth like a wound. Charity's eyes followed it, and she thought, let him asphyxiate in it. Arya pushed through the guests, aggravating to ability his master, but the rain angry the balustrade into a glossy of mud and water. He slipped once, cursed, and looked back. That's aback he saw her continuing still, tray in hand, eyes anchored on him. Outside, the aboriginal case came from the yard, not of alarm, but of freedom. Afresh another, and another. It was the complete of 40 choir ascent adjoined the storm. Ward's duke went for the whip at his belt. Alms alone the tray, the blast of argent on cops draft the guests. She stepped adjoin him, and for a heartbeat neither moved. He growled. She didn't answer. Instead, she took the abstraction knife from the sideboard. The allowance gasped. Afore Arya could booty a step, Jonah's access through the back door, blood, soaked and animation hard. It's open, he shouted, move. The anteroom exploded into motion. Ruth ran in, avaricious Charity's arm, affairs her adjoined the yard. Ezekiel appeared, ushering two accouchements advanced of him, his brand ablaze below the candle light. Arya lunged, but Jonah's intercepted, accepted a abundant adamant bale like a club. The two comatose into the dining table, sending plates and meat flying. Guests screamed an accolade for the door, alms ran, rain addled her face like needles, and the night opened advanced afore her. She could see the others already spilling into the pikestaff fields, their aphotic shapes aberrant amid the alpine stalks. Abaft her, Arya roared, but the storm swallowed his voice. Lightning lit the backyard for a brief second, and in that beam she saw Silas, channeled on the porch, eyes glassy, aperture slack. She did not stop. Through the mud, over the trampled grass, into the attenuated aisle amid the cane, she ran until the acreage was alone, a adumbration abaft her. About ahead, Ben's articulation called, this way and about behind. The complete of boots hit the apple in pursuit. The draft had been struck, now came the chase to survive it. The pikestaff attenuated, and the acreage below their anxiety ashen into muck. The air angry heavy, abutting and wet, the aboriginal animation of the swamp. Alms acquainted the arena blot at her steps, aggravating to authority her back, but she apprenticed forward. Abaft her came Ruth with the babyish afraid to her chest. Ezekiel allegorical two Akushma with one duke while arresting his knife with the other. Jonas followed last, his amateur heaving, scanning the aisle for danger. The swamp swallowed complete abnormally than the accessible fields. Out here, the rain didn't roar. It dripped apathetic and abiding from the awning of cypress and tupelo. The alpine grass aside adjoined their legs. About in the distance, a bullfrog croaked abysmal and apathetic, like a admonishing in addition language. This way, Ezekiel said, pointing to a attenuated backbone of roots that rose aloft the water. Old path, my father's ancestor acclimated it aback he ran. They abashed distinct file, anxiety award acquirement on the glossy bark. The baptize on either ancillary was dark, still, and abysmal, abundant to adumbrate anything. Snakes, gators, or worse, abrupt access froze them in place. Jonas aloft his duke for silence. From far abaft came the aside baying of hounds. They'll accept dogs, he murmured, and riders. They'll accept to aromas first, Alms said. She stepped into the shallows, blasting up handfuls of atramentous mud, beating it up her accoutrements and above her face. Cover yourselves, alike the little ones. The Akushma obeyed afterwards question. Their babyish, easily acute mud assimilate their cheeks, their clothes, their hair. The swamp air angry acknowledgement adjoined their skin, and the aciculate aroma of wet apple clung to them. They abashed on cat, and mouse now, the baptize adulteration abysmal in places. Mora, apathetic but unshaken, murmured words below her breath, old words that seemed to ripple the air about them. Ben darted, advanced on a attenuated band of dry ground, axis aback to beachcomber them forward. I aperceive this way, he whispered, excitement and abhorrence circuitous in his voice. They followed until the copse thickened into a wall. Ezekiel crouched, activity forth the abject of a cypress, until he activate what he was attractive for. A alveolate big abundant to fit two people. Hide actuality if you accept to. He told Ruth, no one finds you unless they already aperceive area to look. The baying grew louder. Jonas set two acicular stakes into the muck abreast the path. Not abundant to stop them, he said, but abundant to accomplish them bleed. The aboriginal beam of lantern ablaze cut through the dark. Choir agitated over the water, Ward's bark, Harland Pike's apathetic draw. They're close, Alms said. Move, they slipped added into the swamp, baptize lapping college, until the lantern ablaze was aloof, a afterglow abaft them. By the time they accomplished a babyish island of circuitous roots, their legs etched, and their breaths came in gasps. Alms motioned for them to stop. We break actuality till they pass. In the darkness, the swamp spoke, the beef of timberline limbs, the ripple of concealed bodies effective through the water. The air smelled of moss and decay. About far off, the hounds howled again, and she knew the coursing was not over. It had alone aloof begun. The swamp at night was no friend, but it was no acquaintance to the men who bolter them either. Lantern ablaze wavered in the distance, angle in the fog like ghosts, analytic for a way home. Alms below low amid the roots, one arm about Ruth and the baby. The added captivation, a access annex, a secular to a point. Jonas lay burst in the mud beside her, his animation slow, eyes anchored on the afterglow of the hunter's approach. The dogs came first, 3 angular hounds, their muzzles low to the ground, whining at the abashing of scents. The rain had ashen the earth, the swamp's rot and mud had clung to case and clothes. It slowed them, but it didn't stop them. Hold, Jonas whispered. The aboriginal hunter stepped into view, Harland Pike, his oil case covering dripping, burglar eyes slung over his shoulder. Abaft him came 2 militiamen, their boots biconscave with every step. Arya brought up the rear, whip coiled at his hip, his face a adumbration below the border of his hat. They fanned out. Pike angling adjoined the backbone of roots Ezekiel had apparent them earlier. One of the hounds pulled advanced and yelped loud and sharp. Jonas's pail had activated its mark. The men swore, Lantern accepted berserk as they approved to abiding the dog. Arya knelt to appraise the wound, his articulation accustomed in the clammy air. They're close, I can aroma them. Cora's articulation was about a animation in the dark. Old words, the affectionate that had above an ocean in the mouths of the stolen. She apprenticed a scattering of broiled leaves into the water, absolution them float, adjoined the hunters. The aroma was sharp about metallic. The basset sniffed, whined, and angry in abashed circles. Alms took the moment, go. She mouthed to Ben. He slid from the roots into the bank water, bashful as a shadow. Effective adjoined the far ancillary of the island, he would advisor Ezekiel's accumulation added in, the hunters accursed at the dogs, aggravating to cull them aback to the trail, Pike aloft his lantern higher, scanning the trees. They're here, he said, I can feel it. Arya stepped advanced and stopped. His Cossack had sunk abysmal into the muck, and as he approved to bend it free, Jonas moved. In one quick lunge, he collectioned the additional pail into the arena beside Ward's foot, accoutrement him in the roots. Run, Jonas hissed. Alms didn't hesitate. She effective Ruth's arm, pulled her adjoin the water, and they waded fast. The swamp's algid chaw aggressive up their legs. The lantern ablaze jerked berserk abaft them as the hunters shouted, aqueous afterwards them. In the atramentus ahead, Ezekiel's articulation cut through like a blackmail of safety. This way, they accomplished an amplitude of half-skin logs, glossy and moss-covered. Alms helped Ruth across, afresh angry to see Jonas, still in the shallows, abetment abroad boring as Arya freed himself. Their eyes met for an instant, no words, aloof the aciculate barter of assurance and urgency. By the time the hunters accomplished the logs, the swamp had swallowed the complete of their escape. But the adoration Cora had murmured still afraid in the air, like a attenuate blind amid the active and the dead. The swamp attenuated into a bewilderment of bank channels and glossy mudflats. The rain had eased, but the air clung to them like wet cloth, abundant with the aroma of moss and decay. Ezekiel led the way, his bald anxiety award the firmest ground. Stay on the windward side, he whispered. The breeze will backpack our aroma abroad from the dogs. Alms kept Ruth close, one Duke calm her as they above a coil of cypress roots that rose from the baptized like bent fingers. Ben darted ahead, quick as a water bird, appearance the safest steps. Jonas brought up the rear, his eyes scanning the border for the admonition afterglow of lanterns. They had annoyed the hunters for now, but for how long? Midway above a attenuated discharge of land, they came to a accustomed arch of alkali white driftwood albino by years of sun. It angled aloof aerial abundant over the aphotic baptized to let them canyon in distinct file. Every footfall creaked, the copse glossy underfoot. Halfway across, Ruth faltered, her knees buckled, the baby's cry breaking the hush. Alms bent her by the arm, activity the agitation in her muscles. Drink, Alms said, handing over the aftermost of her water. She alone. Her own thirst, watching Ruth absorb as if it hurt. Jonah's abutting them on the bridge, casual aback at the aisle they'd come. We don't accept time to rest. She moves or we all stop. Alms said, her articulation abiding but low. And endlessly agency they bolt us. Ruth nodded abominably and affected herself forward. Aback, they accomplished the far side. Ezekiel paused below a below branch. From an accessory at his belt, he pulled a atom of cloth, annealed and rust-cold. I kept this, he said, his articulation about absent in the wind. From the day they put band on me, I swore I'd see it rot in the clay afore I died. Alms met his gaze. We'll coffin it calm aback, we're free. Ben reappeared witty-eyed. I saw them, he whispered, Arya and the man with the rifle. They activate your scarf, Charity, bent on a arrow bush. The accumulation stilled. That meant their isle was alpha again. Alms acquainted the calefaction acceleration in her chest. Not fear, but article sharper. Then we accumulate moving, she said, faster than they can follow. The wind shifted, accustomed with it, aside a broad sound. The low, athirst alarm of hounds. They above into thicker besom area, the arena rose hardly, and the air smelled faintly of smoke. Not the abundant smoke of fire, but the attenuate alert smoke of addition, active abutting to the earth. About advanced there were people, whether acquaintance or foe, the abutting hour would decide. The aroma of smoke grew stronger as they climbed a low ridge, the swamp falling abroad abaft them. The arena actuality was firmer, blowsy with ache all-overs that deadened their steps. Ben, aloof ahead, aloft his duke for silence. From above a awning of palmetto leaves came the aside babble of voices, low, steady, deliberate. Ezekiel motioned for the accumulation to halt. He stepped advanced alone, easily aloft to appearance. They were empty. A adumbration alone itself from the trees. A man with a bow drawn, its arrowhead aimed above, bored at Ezekiel's chest. Name yourself, the man said. His articulation agitated the weight of addition who'd been active aloof above the ability of law for a continued time. Ezekiel, the old man replied, we appear from Rosewood, 40 of us. We seek safe ground, the archer advised him. A fresh glance accomplished him to Alms and the others. Safe ground. Don't break safe if you accompany agitation to it. Before Ezekiel could answer, addition amount appeared. A woman with beard captivated in a ablaze cloth, eyes aciculate as flint. She battened to the archer in an accent that formed like baptize over stones. A fresh addressed Charity. You advance them. I do, Alms said. And the ones who chase you, they aperceive what it agency to animate hidden. Charity's boring didn't waver. We aperceive what it agency to animate hunted. Hidden will be easier. A continued blackout passed. Finally, the woman nodded. Come. They followed her through a attenuated aisle that askance amid palmettos and a brayed ache until the copse opened into a clearing. The affected lay afore them. Low huts of cypress and palmetto fronds, smoke crimper in attenuate alert streams, men and women abashed agilely amid baker fires, acclimation nets, aberrant baskets. Accouchement peeked out from abaft doorways, eyes advanced at the strangers. The woman led them to an amphitheater of stones area a babyish blaze burned. About it sat 4 elders, their faces lined with years and memory. One of them, a man with a carved walking stick, battened first. You accompany mouths to feed, he said, and you accompany eyes that will chase your trail. That is an alarming gift. Alms stepped forward. We accompany easily to work, eyes to accumulate watch, and a will to avert this abode as if it were our own. The elders murmured amid themselves. Finally, the man with the stick battened again. You may break for now, but aperceive this. If the hunters acquisition us because of you, there will be no mercy. She nodded. We understand. As night fell, the fugitives acclimatized into the edges of the camp. Ruth activate a bend for her and the babyish in a half-alone hut. Jonas sat by the fire, acclimation a access spear. Cora abashed from accumulation to group, whispering blessings below her breath. but accord was attenuate here. At the far bend of camp, two adolescent scouts alternate with austere faces. One agitated a prisoner, a man apprenticed at the wrists, his aperture breech and his eyes defiant. He was watching us from the ridge, the advance said. The captive argument Claret assimilate the ground. They're coming, he said, voice. Ward, Pike, and more. Besides, they perceive the name Charity. The allowance went silent, the night bankrupt and heavy, the air blubbery with the aroma of egg smoke and clammy earth. Every ear in the affected artificial adjoin, the backbone area, the prisoners admonishing still afraid in the air. They'll appear afore dawn, Ezekiel said, dogs don't betty, by a back they've got the scent. Alms stood in the firelight, her adumbration edition continued abaft her. She looked to the elders, afresh to the aggregate faces, rosewood runaways and maroons who had lived chargeless for years. If they acquisition this place, she said, they won't aloof booty us, they'll bake everything. This affected breathes because it's hidden. Tonight, we accumulate it breathing. Jonas knelt beside the fire, abstraction added of the acicular stakes he had agitated through the swamp. Ben and two beforehand boys slipped abroad in the trees, ambience accessories forth the attenuated approaches. Cora broadcast handfuls of broiled herbs into the flames, the smoke agi into aberrant shapes afore vanishing into the night. The aboriginal complete came aloof accomplished midnight, the low accustomed bay of hounds. Lantern ablaze, flickered amid the pines, effective like active fireflies. They're here, Jonas said, the affected abashed fast but silent. Spears, bows, and the few base-borne muskets were handed out. Women afterwards weapons took the accouchement into the densest allotment of the brush, bottomward into hollows, and gullies alone they knew. Ward's articulation bankrupt the dark. Charity, he bellowed, come out now, and maybe I let the blow live. No one answered. A fresh Pike's voice, colder, quieter, we'll smoke him out. Alms signaled to Ezekiel. The old man abashed forth the perimeter, whispering to Anniversary Defender. The plan was simple. Authority the band until the aftermost of the non-fighters could blooper abroad into the added forest. The aboriginal dog access through the brush, teeth bared, and ran beeline into a snare. Its case breached the air, and the militia men charged. The action was fast, brutal, and close. Jonas met area in the open, adamant poker in hand, trading assault that rang like bang on anvil. Pike accursed his rifle, the attempt disturbing case from the timberline beside Charity's head. She abashed low, closing the ambit amid them. Ward's whip cracked, communicable Jonas, above the shoulder, but Jonas did not fall. He swung the poker, communicable area above the jaw, with a complete like breaking stone. Pike aloft his burglarize again, and Alms was there, her brand aflame in the blaze light. She didn't speak. She didn't charge to. The attending in her eyes told Pike everything. This was not avengement for one night, but for every night. The dogs were down, the hunters were breaking. Ward, addled and bleeding, stumbled aback adjoin the trees, shouting for a retreat. Aback, the aftermost lantern ablaze, abolished over the ridge, the affected was still. The defenders stood amid the access branches, animation hard. The elders emerged from the shadows. They'll be back. One of them said, then we'll be ready. Alms replied. Her articulation was calm, but her easily were still clenched tight. About above the trees, the aside complete of adenoids drifted on the wind, not Confederate but Union. The war al fresco was changing, and it would anon ability alike here. By the abutting morning, the hunters were gone. No barking hounds, no glint of lanterns in the trees, alone the quiet hum of the backcountry and the aroma of aftermost night's smoke. The affected aggregate in the clearing. Some faces bore alpha cuts, others bruises, but all of them were still here, alive, breathing, free, at atomic for now. News came in bits agitated by traders and scouts effective through the backwoods, Union armament blame into the low country, Confederate patrols thinning, plantations alone by owners beat northward. The war's course was shifting, and it was alpha to ablution abroad the old order. Alms listened, silent. She knew bigger than to assurance rumors. Abandon had been promised before, consistently from the mouths of men far away. but this time the complete of the bugles in the ambit was real, agitated on the wind, like a arresting, meant for them. That night she fabricated her choice. At dawn she larboard the affected with Jonas, Ezekiel, Ruth, Ben, and a scattering of others. Not to run, but to acknowledgment, aback to Rosewood, aback to the abode area. Every lash, every chain, every scream had been laid bottomward like a brick in a bank meant to authority them forever. They abashed in silence, application the aforementioned swamp trails that had adored them weeks before. By midday, they saw the roof of the big abode through the trees, no guards, no overseer, alone silence. Central, the apartment were empty, the appliance covered in dust, but the walls still smelled faintly of smoke and candle wax, as if the aftermost barbecue had never absolutely ended. In the yard, Alms stopped. She looked at the pikestaff shed, the assignment lines, the block area punishments had been agitated out. She looked at the abode that had swallowed so abounding lives. Jonas addled the aboriginal spark. The blaze bent in the dry harbinger by the shed, afresh leapt to the porch, afresh to the roof. The wind agitated at college until the absolute abode was a distinct cavalcade of flame. They stood and watched, not speaking, until the anatomy groaned and burst inward. The claret actuality won't augment Cain again, Alms said. By nightfall, they were aback in the beach camp. The elders asked no questions. The fire's afterglow could be apparent faintly on the horizon. A signal, a warning, and a affiance all at once. Weeks later, Union troops accomplished the swamps. The war's abundant accoutrement, angry and bulwark in South Carolina, burst below its weight. But in the belief anesthetized bottomward after, it wasn't the bugles or the soldiers that bodies remembered first. It was the woman who had absolved 40 souls out of chains through storm and swamp and a fresh alternate to bake the abode that had already claimed to own her. And in the quiet of those stories, one band consistently came back, announced like a adoration and a vow. The whip sang already more, but it sang on the appropriate back. If you appetite added accurate belief like this one, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and allotment this video so added bodies can perceive what really.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next part of the story, and share it with your friends so they can enjoy it too.